America's oldest university is confronting one of its darkest legacies. Harvard just completed a deep dive into its past, and it discovered some painful truths and announced plans to address them. The report is called Harvard and the Legacy of Slavery. It looks at the school's deep connections to wealth generated from slave labor. This report shows that Harvard's faculty and staff enslaved more than 70 people during the 17th and 18th centuries while slavery was legal in Massachusetts. Harvard says it will now spend $100 million to address its ties to slavery. Based on the report's findings, those ties run very, very deep. The university says it was directly invested in sugar and rum industries in the Caribbean, as well as cotton and railroads in the U.S. In the first half of the 1800s, slavery profiteers accounted for more than a third of Harvard's private donations. In other words, Harvard's ties to enslavement helped fund its rise to prominence. Now, other prestigious universities have made similar findings, including Brown and Georgetown. And more than 80 schools have joined a consortium called Universities Studying Slavery. So what's behind this wider movement, and why now? Joining us to discuss it now is Katie Mangan, a senior writer for the Chronicle of Higher Education. Ms. Mangan, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you. It's good to be with you.
What have some of the early reactions been like to Harvard's report?
Well, it was a truly remarkable report that came out today when President Lawrence Bacot released this statement and also a 130-page report outlining how the university has not only had historical ties to slavery, but been complicit and perpetuating what he called profoundly immoral practices. These are very, very strong words coming from Harvard and long overdue, a lot of people would say. Harvard certainly is not the first university to grapple with its ties to slavery, but this is certainly one of the most extensive and really powerful reports that we've seen.
We heard in this report that a benefactor of the law school enslaved a woman named Cuba, and one of that woman's ancestors spoke today about the study. Here's part of what they said.
Certainly it was elation at first in terms of just understanding, wow, our family was connected, to this whole story. But then, after settling back, it's an emotional trip. When I read, certainly some of the hardships that they went through, how cruel they were treated, even though they were up north and not down south. Slavery is slavery, and the type of cruelty that they experienced, not as harsh, I'm sure, as working in the fields of Alabama and Mississippi, but working on Brattle Street in Cambridge, had its very difficult times.
That's so powerful for him to be able to point to an ancestor and know that piece of his study. But beyond the personal impact on the descendants of these slaves, what impact is this report meant to have? I mean, it would be real easy for something like this to be done, make everyone feel good, and then that's the end of it.
The report came out with some very specific recommendations of what they wanted to see the university done, and the final recommendation was to hold Harvard accountable, to have regular reports and analyses to make sure that Harvard is doing what it says it's going to do. And at this point, they're not talking so much about direct payments to the descendants of enslaved people, but more a matter of researching and trying to locate as many people as possible to try to bring more stories like the ones that we just heard to light so that this becomes a more concrete and more tangible issue when you're dealing with real people, real stories. That's one of the things that we're seeing other universities do, is to spend a lot of time trying to track down these descendants, hear their stories, and get them involved in the steps moving forward that Harvard has pledged to take using this very, very sizable amount of money.
Yeah, if we could back up to that list we were just showing in terms of what Harvard plans to do with the $100 million that it has committed to this project, including establishing a legacy of slavery fund, creating memorializations and curricula around enslaved people, developing partnerships with historically black colleges and universities, and also connecting to Native communities. I learned from this report that Harvard's charter said it was supposed to educate white and Indian residents of the colonies, but only one person of tribal descent received a degree in Harvard's earlier days. Is there a timeline for the use of this money, or are there any kind of guardrails on where this money goes, or is that still being figured out?
As far as I can tell, that's still being figured out, but they are going to move ahead with these steps. This $100 million that has been dedicated, that some of it's going to be freed up immediately to take some initial steps, and some of it will be used later on. But a lot of the talk really is about scholarship and teaching, teaching more classes, more teacher training, reaching out more to historically Black colleges and universities, and trying to strengthen those ties with exchange programs to bring more faculty members and students to Harvard, really just trying to study the matter and know exactly where they stand before they get down to the details about specifically how the money is going to be used, more in terms of the reparations that people are really eager to see.
I should note, by the way, that NBC News did reach out to Harvard University and asked if someone could be made available for tonight's broadcast. The university declined, but that invitation stands. Before I have to let you go, I wonder where this sits in the middle of all these other efforts to try to address the legacy of slavery in higher education. We put on the screen some of what Brown and Georgetown have done. There have been a number of efforts to deal with economic gaps. Students from disadvantaged backgrounds, Harvard and Stanford are two of the schools that have said, if you get admitted, we will come up with the money to let you in. You do not have to worry about paying for your education. How does this fit into all of the rest of those efforts to sort of close some of these racial gaps before we go?
I think it's a very important part in terms of trying to really come to terms with the legacy of discrimination, and just to make very, very real why it is that colleges are taking all of these steps to try to plug equity gaps. These equity gaps are only growing and have grown more since COVID. And so I think it's just, there's a new urgency right now to make sure that universities are not just paying lip service to these efforts to close equity gaps, but that they're really doing something about it. And I think the feeling is that bringing these stories to light and bringing these people to tell their stories is only going to help solidify the resolve of universities to take the steps that they're being called on to take to plug these long-standing and in fact widening equity gaps.
I should note, by the way, the report is online at legacyofslavery.harvard.edu. It is a remarkable piece of research. Legacyofslavery.harvard.edu. Catherine Mangan of the Chronicle of Higher Education, thank you for making time for us. We appreciate it.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.